To be here, my name is Hanoi and I'm a double major in applied physics and music. In 2010, my dad and I were supposed to get on a flight. But before we could get on that flight, my dad said that he could not move his arms. So me and my mom and my dad got into a taxi and we rushed to the hospital. And within 6 hours, my dad was paralyzed from the neck down. And it turned out that my dad had what's called acute transverse myelitis. It's an autoimmune disease which attacks the myelin sheath in the spinal cord and leaves you paralyzed. So my dad was basically bedridden for 6 months, and in that 6 months I basically lived with, me and my mom lived with my dad in the hospital. And I accompanied my dad every morning to his physical therapy sessions, which were in the mornings and in the afternoons and at night, and saw my dad had to learn how to walk again. Fast forward to now, fortunately my dad has recovered and he can walk again. But the experience that I had accompanying my dad to the physical therapy sessions and seeing all the other patients who were going through physical therapy made me realize how grueling and how difficult and how challenging physical therapy and physical rehabilitation can be. So I'm here to talk about Sans Frontières, and I'm interested in building instruments designed specifically for disabled and handicapped patients. If you think about acoustic instruments, what's the problem with acoustic instruments? Well, they demand very, very fine motor skills, especially in your hand and finger joints. It doesn't matter if you play cello, violin, piano, clarinet, guitar. The minute you lose control over your hands and fingers, it could be from a neurological disease. It could be, in the case of my father, some kind of autoimmune disease which attacks the neurons. It could be from a debilitating accident, or you could be part of the armed veterans and you had a debilitating amputation from that experience. You won't be able to play an instrument. And music therapy has been very, very beneficial to patient recovery. Active music therapy, where the patient is actively involved in the process of creating and improvising music, has shown to be even more beneficial. So I'm thinking, how can we empower physically and disabled and handicapped patients with musical expression? It's very difficult to redesign the mechanisms of acoustic instruments, such as the saxophone, to accommodate, let's say, a one-handed player. It's very difficult to redesign the mechanisms of these instruments to fit the wide array of disabilities that are out there. So I'm suggesting a new instrument. Ooh, wow, that was not supposed to come out in one go. That's okay. So we start first with here, software instruments. Thanks to the power of computers and recent developments in signal processing, we've been able to construct very accurate models of musical instruments and how sound propagates. So for example, we have a very good understanding of how the piano propagates its sound and how the violin propagates its sound. And these physical models have been very successful commercially. But the great thing about using software instruments is I can interface things like flex sensors here, which measures flex, things like accelerometers and force sensors, and attach them to open source microcontrollers like the Arduino, and use these to control instrumental parameters like note selection. If the patient can't move their fingers, but can still move, let's say, their shoulders, if they can still move their knees, why not stick a flex sensor there and use that to control the instrument? Using software instruments also allows me to interface these with things like motion tracking. For example, if the patient can't move their fingers, but can move in a room, why not use the Microsoft Kinect to track the location of the user and make the instrument louder if he's standing there and make the instrument softer if he's standing here. This is the Leap Motion, which allows tracking of my fingers, and I can do stuff like this. And control the synthesizer using just my natural hand movements. So it allows me to distribute these modes of controls to other functioning parts of the body. But input is only half the question. What about output? I suggest that we send, once these sounds have been processed in the computer, we send this digital signal into an acoustic resonator that mimics the behavior of real acoustic instruments. And I've been doing these things with materials as cheap as cardboard. This has two very, very good potential benefits. Number one, the instrument will behave like an instrument. It will propagate sound exactly like a violin would, exactly like a cello would, unlike a speaker. Number two, from the patient's perspective, having an instrument that you can physically hold, that you can feel breathe and resonate, much like a violin or a cello would, I feel is a lot more of an intimate experience and is a lot more emotionally connecting. So Sans Frontières aims to combine Modern technology, like modern sensors and motion tracking technology, combine it with centuries of instrument refinement to develop novel instruments and mediums of expression for musical expression for the disabled, and even reinvent what an instrument means in the 21st century. Thank you very much.